Hey everybody, my name is Ashley and welcome back to my home. This morning I'm going to get some grains soaking. What I want to do is make some sprouted flour. I know that if you can sprout your grains, this makes the flour more nutritious, and it also helps to break down some of the anti-nutrients such as phytic acid that allows your body to better absorb all of the wonderful nutrients that grains have. So this process actually takes several days. Today I'm going to measure out my grain, get it soaking, and then over the next 2 to 3 days I'm going to be rinsing the grain and allow these grains to sprout. After our grains sprout, we then dry them in a dehydrator for an additional 12 to 18 hours. From there we can grind it into flour and we will get it ready for storage. So the grain I've chosen to sprout is soft white wheat. I do have some hard red wheat, but I decided to go with the soft white for no particular reason, I guess. I've shown how I store my bulk grains in these bakery buckets, and I also have my wheat in here. These 3-gallon buckets hold an entire bag of 25 pounds of wheat, which is great. I just kind of slapped the label from the bag onto here. It's peeling off a little bit, but it does tell me, it reminds me what it is, when I got it, and also the nutrient content and cooking instructions if I wanted to cook it just from its raw form. Because I've never done this before, I don't want to do too much at one time, and I also want to make sure I have plenty of room in my dehydrator for the berries to dry out. So let me show you the process. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and let this soak undisturbed for 18 to 24 hours. And then after that, we will rinse it really well, keep them more or less dry, and then just rinse them and continue to drain them, leave them stored drained until they show signs of sprouting. Our grains have sprouted and we are ready for the dehydrating process. These have been going for 2.5 days. Today is day 2 and it's evening time, and the first day I started it in the morning. So it's been 1 day, 2 day and a half. After the initial soak, I went through the rinsing process that you just saw 3 times. I'm now going to give them a final rinse and we'll get them in our dehydrator. I just rinsed off the grain and I want to show you the little tails that have sprouted. This is the only food dehydrator that I have ever owned, and when looking for one, the requirement that was the most important to me is that there was as little plastic as possible. So almost all of it is made out of stainless steel. The trays that come with this food dehydrator have a very large grid, so the grains would just fall right through. So I found these silicone sheets that I'm going to use. They came larger than the sheets themselves, so I just cut them down, washed them, threw them in to dry, and they are completely dry and ready to go. My food dehydrator did come with a mesh sheet. However, there's only one, and I'm going to need more than one. I don't think I'm going to need all 6 trays, but I definitely need more than one. And then it came with this, which is really more of like a fruit leather tray. And I wanted the airflow, so that's why I went with a mesh. So I'm just gonna go ahead and spread these around on each of the trays. I'm going to set this timer for 18 hours and run it at 150 degrees. Even though they're supposed to dry for 12 to 18 hours, I wanted to set it so that it at least didn't go more than that. But I'll be up and checking on this at around the 12, 13 hour mark, so I'll be able to keep a close eye. The proper way to store grains that are prepared this way is in the freezer. So you can actually freeze them right now after they've come out of the dehydrator. So they're sprouted and then dried again. Cool them down to room temperature and go ahead and put them in a container where they can stay in the freezer. However, because today we want to try experimenting with the grain, we're going to grind it into flour, and then any flour that's left over, I will then put in the freezer in the same way. After the grains had been dehydrating for about 4 hours, I took a peek and they were already dry. I did go ahead and turn the food dehydrated down to 125 degrees anyway, and just let them continue drying overnight. I'm just getting all the grains poured into the dry container so that I can use my Vitamix to grind it up. Now that we've gone through the whole process of sprouting, drying, grinding, and using the flour, I want to take a minute to talk about the things that I learned along the way. So first of all, 1 pound of dry wheat berries made a little over 3 cups of flour. So that's something that I'm going to keep in mind as I go through the process again and again. When thinking about how much flour I want to end up with, that helps me better know how much I need to start with. I'm really excited to start using the sprouted flour in more recipes. I've now made the muffins, which you'll see in just a minute, and I'll let you know how those turned out. I'd like to try some other things, maybe some cookies, and then work my way into making bread and rolls and things like that. Whether you sprouted flour before, or even if you grind your own flour from the wheat berries, if you have any suggestions or helpful tips that I can have going into that, that would be great. You can just leave them in the comments. I've been really inspired by this whole process, and so I'm on to the next batch already. I now have 4 times the amount that I started with initially, And the reason I have 4 is because I think even though I used 4 trays in my dehydrator, I think I could easily get 2 pounds of grain drying in one round through the dehydrator. The other thing I started wondering about was because after 4 hours at 160 degrees in my dehydrator worked to dry the grain out, I'm going to actually try using my oven with half of this and use just a normal cookie tray, maybe set a timer every hour and just roll it around. And that will help to serve as the airflow to make sure none of the grains that are down below get trapped with moisture. I really want to make sure that I have some of this grain on hand at all times. So I want to try to experiment with different ways to be able to make the process as smooth as possible and also to get a good volume done at one time. So that's why I want to split it out between the dehydrator and then also try the oven. I'm still going to use the same soft white wheat and the same 1 pound portions in these jars. I don't want to change too many variables at one time. So I think this is going to be a good place to start. Even though these jars will technically hold more than 1 pound, I feel like once the wheat really absorbs that liquid, and then when I'm resting it on its side and I kind of roll it throughout the day when it's sprouting, I didn't want to get too many in there so that it still had some airflow. That's why I'm still using the same amount of wheat in these big half-gallon jars. Now on to the muffins. The muffins we made were Morning Glory muffins, and they turned out so good. I was really, really happy with the results, and my kids loved them too. The flour was really easy to work with. The batter was really easy to mix. And I feel like the texture of the muffins when they were done, that's the thing I was most unsure about. The texture was great. Thanks for coming along with this process. It was really fun. I'm super inspired to keep going and to have some of this sprouted wheat around at all times for any use that may come up. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more of what comes out of my kitchen, please consider subscribing. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.